So if you follow real estate, you've probably heard the story about Florida, right? That its housing market is a total mess because of greedy insurance companies and one too many hurricanes. But what if I told you that story, the one all over the news, is missing the real crisis? The one that's happening right now, completely out of sight, deep underground.
And let's be clear, this isn't some far-off, maybe one-day problem. This is today. We're talking about people turning on their faucets and tasting the ocean. There's enough salt in the water to make coffee undrinkable and to literally eat away at the pipes in their homes. That's a massive red flag that something is fundamentally broken.
So that brings us to the big question we're tackling here. Are all these financial headlines, the sky-high insurance bills, the falling condo prices, are they just symptoms of a much bigger, much more physical problem that most people don't even know exists? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is a resounding yes.
First, let's just quickly go over the narrative you already know. The common wisdom, the story you hear all the time, is that Florida's real estate market is just caught in a perfect storm of financial bad luck. And here are the things everyone's talking about. You've got average home insurance rocketing up past $15,000 a year. That's almost 5 times the national average. Condo prices are starting to slide, and some poor owners are getting slapped with special assessments for $100,000 just for critical repairs. It's really easy to look at all this and just blame greedy corporations or a rough hurricane season.
But here's the absolute key. These financial headaches, they're not the disease, they're the fever. The real problem isn't something you can find on a balance sheet, it's a physical problem, literally in the ground under millions of people's feet.
Okay, so let's peel back that first layer of this physical crisis. And honestly, this one is a shocker. Some of Miami's most recognizable, most expensive buildings, the ones that make up that famous Skyline, are actually slowly sinking. So, how in the world do we know this? Well, scientists are using this incredible piece of satellite tech called INSAR. The easiest way to think about it is like a super precise radar gun in space that can spot millimeter-sized changes in the ground level over many years. To give you an idea of how powerful it is, it's the same tech NASA uses to see the ground swell around active volcanoes. It's that good. And here's basically how it works. A satellite zaps the exact same spot on Earth, say the top corner of a high-rise, with a radar beam, over and over again. By stacking hundreds of those images on top of each other, it can detect movement as small as the thickness of a credit card. It's just mind-blowingly precise. And the results are pretty stunning. Some of these gigantic buildings have sunk by as much as 3 inches in just 7 years. Now, 3 inches might not sound like the end of the world, but for a finished building made of concrete and steel, that is a massive warning sign that the ground itself is not stable. Which, of course, leads us to the next logical question. A sinking building is a symptom, but what's the cause? What is happening deep underground that's making the very foundation of South Florida so, well, unreliable? And here it is. This is the heart of the entire crisis. The Floridian Aquifer, this massive underground sea of fresh water that 10 million people rely on to live, is being poisoned by the Atlantic Ocean. It is a slow-motion catastrophe playing out right under everyone's feet. And this chart just shows how staggering the change has been. Back in the 90s, water from the monitoring wells was perfectly safe to drink. Now look at today. Wells in places like Hollandale Beach are pulling up water with chloride levels over 10,000 milligrams per liter. That's not drinking water. It's basically brine. This bar chart really puts it into perspective. See that tiny little bar on the left? That's the EPA safe limit for drinking water. Now, look at the bar for what's coming out of the ground in Hollandale Beach, and you can see just how terrifyingly close that is to pure ocean seawater. This stuff is not fresh water anymore.
So, why is this happening? You can think of it as a 1-2 punch. First, we're pulling way too much water out. Florida adds about 900 new residents every single day, and they all need water. Second, we've paved over everything. All that concrete and asphalt means rainwater can't soak back into the ground to recharge the aquifer. So, as the freshwater level drops, the heavier saltwater from the ocean just shoves its way in to fill the gap.
All right, now it's time to connect the dots. Let's link this invisible underground water crisis back to the very visible, very expensive insurance crisis we started with. Because it turns out, the dying aquifer is a huge driver of the insurance market's total collapse. This timeline just shows how fast everything went off the rails. You can see things were getting bad, but after Hurricane Ian in 2022, it was like a dam broke. Premiums started tripling. Then you see a 34% jump in a single year, and all the while, the big insurance carriers are just packing up and leaving the state altogether.
And here's the real reason why. The people who calculate risk for a living, the actuaries, they're not just looking at hurricane models anymore. They're looking deeper. They're looking at the data on the aquifer. They know that having salt water in the ground accelerates the corrosion of concrete and steel foundations. They see these desperate measures like engineered flooding, and they realize the whole system is under threat. They're no longer pricing in the risk of wind damage. They're pricing in the risk of total infrastructure failure.
So let's bring it all home. What does all of this mean for you, for a homeowner, for a potential buyer, for anyone who has a stake in Florida? Let's break down what you need to know.
First, and this is so important to understand, this is not another 2008. That was a financial crisis, a problem of bad paperwork. This is a physical crisis. The market isn't just having a little correction. It is permanently reevaluating the price of property based on the new, undeniable reality of the ground and water it sits on.
Which means, if you're thinking of buying property there, you need to be asking a whole new set of questions. It's not just about the HOA fees anymore. You need to ask, what are the historical chloride levels in the water here? You need to ask, does this area ever flood on a perfectly sunny day? That's a huge sign of rising groundwater. And you need to demand to see the insurance projections for the next 5 years, not just what the bill is today. In the end, it all comes down to this one powerful idea. You can often solve financial problems with financial tools. But a physical problem, salt in the water you need to live, the ground sinking underneath your home, that is a whole different kind of reckoning. And it leaves us all with one final thought. When the price of real estate finally matches the reality of its environment, who's going to be left holding the bill?